Did you just throw your phone?
No, I did not throw the phone.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Beg Pardon, the podcast that dares you to say it again. As always, I'm your host Anthony, joined by Carlos. You want to wait? Yeah, I was like, are you going to wave or...
Yeah, I was like, I'll bow. I don't know why I thought that was a good move. I was like, that looks kind of cool. But then I was like, no, it doesn't. It looks like I just flipped or something.
Right.
My cool point's out the window.
For those of you that are new to the show, Beg Pardon is a podcast that dares you to say it again. Carlos and I talk about topics that you never knew you cared about with our opinions that you also never asked for. So we feel like we kind of hit our sweet spot by doing shows about this. And today, AM Say It Isn't So. That's what we're talking about. AMC Theaters. They're, if you guys haven't heard, they are potentially not going to make it through this post COVID-19 like rebuild. I guess you could say that. They released a statement last week, I believe, indicating, what was that? The strong likelihood, or the strong, it's something along those lines, the strong likelihood that they do not believe they will be able to function as a company because of this COVID-19 epidemic. And also, for those of you that don't know, AMC is the largest movie theater chain in the world. So it's a big deal.
Yep.
Whether you go to movies or not, it's a big deal for studios that are making movies. It's a big deal for like the classic cinema lover. And it's gonna, I think if they don't open, it's definitely gonna be ripples throughout the entire. I mean, even if you don't go to the movies and you watch things on Netflix and Hulu and other like streaming services, I feel like everyone is gonna feel the reverberations from something like that happening. I do.
Yeah, I mean, without AMC, Avengers doesn't hit $2 billion.
Right.
Fast and Furious doesn't hit $1 billion. All these movies now, they're blockbuster tentpoles. They're not hitting billions of dollars because you take out the largest player, like you said, in the movie theater industry, and how many screens do you think you're going to get these movies on? So I think, it's kind of one of those relationships where studios have to think like, I need you just as much as you need me.
Right.
Because, yeah, you can stream your movie. Universal did it, which we'll talk about that in a second. You can stream it. But how much money did Trolls 2 really make as opposed to how much it would have made in the theater?
Right.
Because if you're paying $15 a pop for you and your friends and everything, that's $15 each person. Now, say you get Trolls streaming and you decide to invite those 5 or 6 people over. Now you paid, $30 one time. So, I mean, really, where do you gauge that?
Right. And I think that we also have a conversation. We have to have a conversation on what now becomes like. Would these studios that would normally take these huge hits financially to produce film, like the Avengers films, like 150, 160, 170 million dollar budgets, if they can no longer anticipate making over $1 billion, $2 billion at the box office? I think you're going to see studios a lot less likely to take that type of hit. Similar to the Irishman, you couldn't find a studio that was willing to take the cost it was gonna take to make that film, and that's exactly why it ended up on Netflix.
Yeah, there was no Martin Scorsese.
They couldn't do it.
Did not want it on Netflix. It wasn't like he was like, I'm gonna make a great movie for Netflix. That wasn't the case. Just nobody wanted it, man.
Right.
Nobody wanted the headache that came with it. But yeah, like you said, how do people get less risky basically making movies because you're not going to make your money back? Or do we go back to the days of straight to DVD type or straight to VHS type of movies where those go onto streaming services but your big blockbusters still go in the theaters? Because I mean, realistically, AMC is shooting, I believe, to try to open in July. Realistically,
I think Milan is I think Milan is the first like the slate of first films to go back with AMC's opening, like July 17th, around that time, the teens of July.
It's Tenet, the Christopher Nolan movie, and Mulan. I think are the two that are kind of pushing to be around there.
Okay.
Which is good because Tenet's had a lot of good, what's the word I'm looking for? Projection, basically, coming up.
Yeah.
Anticipation. That's what I want. Anticipation. But it's kind of like, because when AMC opens, they're going to go to 25% occupancy to
Right.
socially distance people.
Right.
To be fair, when you go to a movie, unless it's opening weekend, I feel like that's about how many people are in a theater to begin with, because of all
Correct.
the different show times you have. There really
Yeah.
aren't packed houses unless it's opening weekend.
Right.
So, 25% might not be that big of a hit to them financially in terms of getting people through the door. But I do think that AMC should and might use their A-list to speed up the rewards you get. So, for instance, you get X amount, you get a $5 reward for concessions. I would not see it being impossible for them to move that number closer so you get those $5 rewards faster to spend with the concessions. I could see that happening.
For those of you guys listening that don't know, AMC currently offers, again, we don't know if it's going to stay there or even if the company's going to be here, but AMC currently offers a program. It's called the A-List program. Comes out to around like $21 and some odd cents a month.
Yep.
And you can see 3 movies a week. And your week starts on a Friday, which is awesome. But you can see 3 films a week. And then you also get free size upgrades at concessions if you buy concessions. And similar to what Carlos was saying, after you accumulate enough points, and of course points are based on dollars spent, you get $5 credit for the concessions of your choosing. So that's kind of like the A-List program in a nutshell. And anyone can sign up for it. You don't have to like meet certain thresholds to be a part of it. You just pay the money.
Yeah.
But back to the comment that you made about the 25% occupancy. While I think that's what they're used to, I think that's part of the problem. I don't know that these theaters really make any money whenever they have 25% occupancy. And statistically, there are less and less people going to the cinema, period.
Yeah.
People want to be at home. It has to be a draw, like a strong draw for you to get in your car, drive to the theater, sit next to people you don't want to be around, in a theater that probably isn't that nice to begin with, and sit in chairs that don't recline all the way. Like, it really has to be a draw now for you to want to go and do that, and that's why we're seeing like the uprising of Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus. Everyone has a streaming service now, and I think obviously that's part of the problem. And I just think that if AMC does go under, this just expedites what is going to happen anyways. Not tomorrow, not next year, not the next 5 years from now, but it's going to expedite the collapse of the traditional American cinema. And we mentioned Martin Scorsese and the Irishman. I think that there was a conversation with Netflix whenever Netflix approached them about, hey, we can do this film, we can do it. And I think that he was able to negotiate that. Well, I still want like at least a limited theatrical release, because he's part of that age, right? He's part of that the old guard, if you will, of Hollywood cinema. That's like, hey, I'm part of a time where. And I feel like you and I grew up in that time even too, where going to the movies was like going to the going to the movies is what like helped stir my interest in film and performance. Like just being there. I do not feel the same watching something on Netflix as I do in the cinema to this day. I don't feel the same. It's part of the experience for me.
Yeah.
And I think that it's part of the experience for so many other people. Just not enough. I think the new generations are finding it more comfortable to be at home, right? And watch something on Netflix and watch something on Hulu on the comfort of their own couch and just be comfortable because they grew up in that generation. That's what they're used to. So then you have people like you mentioned, Universal, who released Trolls during the was it during this whole pandemic? Yeah, during the whole pandemic. Yeah, during the whole pandemic, just straight to streaming. and it was this huge uproar. But you didn't see that with Lovebirds. You didn't see the huge uproar whenever they decided, hey, they're just going to put Lovebirds straight on Netflix. And to be honest, and I saw Lovebirds, to be honest, it's probably better that it went straight to Netflix. Netflix reportedly paid $20 million for the rights for it to be on Netflix, like flat out $20 million for that to be on a budget of I think like 14 or 17 million. So they're making a little bit of money, but were they going to gamble with the slow open of these theaters to try for like a July release? Apparently not.
It's not a blockbuster.
So I think it's not a blockbuster. It's not Trolls. I mean Trolls was going to be anticipated to bring in a lot more than that because they have preceding movies that were also successful. So I think it was a bigger thing. And then AMC, for those of you that don't know, AMC kind of like put their foot in the sand and was like, fine, even after we open, we will stop showing Universal films at all of our movie theaters. Yeah. And for Universal to be like, that's fine. I mean, that's a thing, right? They either know something I don't know, or there's this contingency plan that they're like, it's fine. Who cares?
I think it's more, a couple of things. So the whole Lovebirds Trolls, the difference between that was that Lovebirds, like you said, was sold to Netflix, whereas
Correct.
Trolls was never sold to anyone. They just pulled it out of the theater. It's not like, Amazon.
Why take that loss?
What's up?
Why take that loss financially?
I mean, they could have waited because the thing about it is that there's contracts between the theaters and the studios.
Right.
So once you promote that you're going to put your movie into the theater, you have to let it play in a theater X amount of weeks before you can put it on home release. That's just, it's always been that way.
Right.
By not selling it to another studio like Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, whatever, to go around that and say, okay, it's not ours anymore, and putting it out on streaming, they violated that agreement. So now you took away any chance the theater could have to make money, and then you hid behind it because if you remember, Trolls kind of came out with in theaters and on streaming. Well, what theaters are playing in? There's like maybe 6 open in the country at that time.
Right.
So really, what theater was it playing in? And also to the Martin Scorsese thing with Irishman, he wanted that in theaters. Yes, because he's of the older generation of we go to the movies, that's my thing. But also, to be nominated for an Oscar, you have to play in the theaters for a certain amount of time and in the big theaters. So New York, L.A., things like that for a certain amount of weeks, certain amount of screens, then you can get the Oscars. I don't know if it's going to be something that comes full circle where like a younger generation who's used to streaming is going to see it as like cool and antique to go to the theater. Yeah. And that's going to drive them to go, but I don't
I hope not, or I'm going to feel old real quick.
They go see the talkies, as they used to say back in the day when it came sound.
Yeah.
I don't think that, it's going to become something that streaming takes over, because especially I think fandom is going to be what saves theaters. When Harry Potter came out, how many people came in droves dressed like Harry Potter to be with people similar to them to watch this experience? It was like a real like sporting event. When Avengers came out, Endgame, being in that theater was like a Super Bowl game. I mean, you could feel the tension and the electricity in that theater. People were buzzing. People clapped, people cheered, people cried all at the same time. So you kind of get that like communal experience of we're going through this, and it's an emotional roller coaster together with strangers you don't even know. Whereas streaming, it's cool, but you're not feeding off of that energy from other people. So, I mean, if I saw Endgame at home, I probably still would have cried, but it wouldn't have been as dramatic without having, that shared community of people. And I think by Universal putting their foot in the sand and saying, like, no, we're still going to do this, I think it's just pride and them doubling down and saying, like, no, we're still going to do it. Because the minute their next Fast and Furious movie comes out and no one cares about Dom's family and it doesn't hit $1 billion, they're going to quickly say, you know what, streaming's done. We're not going to stream ever again. This is the same company that started the Universal Monsters universe gloated about it, bragged about it, paraded it around. They did one movie and they were like, cut it, shut it down, and erase the Mummy. You don't even hear about the Mummy anymore.
Right. Well, either that or obviously it's I mean, in the industry, everyone knows everything before we know. The public knows anything. I mean, they probably knew. AMC's struggling hardcore. Or it's going to be the other way around, where AMC was like, just kidding, we will air your movies because people will make money off of them. People want to see them, so we will air your movies. We were just kidding. I am sorry. Because in an industry where money talks, who has more right now? Surely not AMC, because they're talking about not even opening up the doors.
Yeah.
They laid their CEO off in March. So they know that they don't have very many bargaining chips here.
Right.
To be like, this is what we're gonna do, and I don't know. I'm a little resistant to change. I'm a little resistant to change whenever it comes to like going from theaters to streaming. I like having the option of either.
Yeah.
Netflix has some extraordinary originals.
A Marriage Story.
Now, but remember, whenever you could get the what was that, 3 DVDs to your house a week or something? Whenever it first came out, and we thought that was swell. We're like, look at this. This is great, right? And their catalog wasn't nearly what it is now. But that just showed you where everything was moving. And you brought up A Marriage Story. What studio would have picked up A Marriage Story last year? Or the year before that?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe none. Yeah. So I think having Netflix and Hulu, you now have these platforms that will and can take those smaller productions, art house type films, stuff like that we wouldn't be able to see. And that's a spectacular film.
Yeah.
It's so good. And we wouldn't have had the ability to see it. So that's on the other side of the coin, where we as the audience wouldn't have the ability to see it. It's kind of like what you said, where now in the theaters, it's more of like the instant, like the box office grand slams, like that just what we're going to see the most of in the theaters because they make the most money. And those movies are fun to watch, obviously. Everyone thinks that they're fun to watch. Mm-hmm. But if you ask people realistically what film, like at the end of their life, what film impacted your life the most, they're usually not those movies. They're usually not they're usually not very visceral, with the exception of obviously like Endgame. Right? Yeah. With the exception of Endgame, the rest of those movies they weren't emoting the same visceral reaction that people had in the theaters that night.
Yeah.
They just weren't, and they're not supposed to, and that's fine. But I still think that the blessing is that we are now able to experience and see more everyday stories. I think that we can connect to, that we won't. It's not really being as like pushed on us as like in the theater. Like Hollywood doesn't feel like it's being pushed on you. Whenever I see A Marriage Story, I don't think like Hollywood. You know what I mean? Like I don't think like I'm being put. I think like, wow, this is a real divorce. This is what really looks like, and experience it from people that I know.
Yeah. It was intense.
Like, right? Like I really feel this.
Yeah, I think that I think Netflix and Amazon are in a good space right now, and this is gonna sound really like stupid, but I don't think they should leave that box, because they're telling great stories with series. They have Umbrella Academy, Stranger Things. They have comedies like Space Force on there. They have good stories that they can tell on there. Ozark. And that in and of itself, you binge it. I mean, that's a movie in and of itself. That's 10 hours worth of a movie that you just watched. And those are type of stories that you have to tell in like a serial. You can't tell them in a movie. Like Stranger Things, you couldn't do 3 movies of Stranger Things and gotten the same reaction you did with the series. And also I think that that's great. And right. Marriage Story, like you were saying, it feels more like an indie film, and that's great that Netflix can do that. But at the end of the day, I feel like when people want to see the movies, they want to see classics or they want to see big blockbusters. You want to see like a Citizen Kane or you want to see an Avengers. What you don't want to see is an Irishman or a Marriage Story. You don't want to see that on the big screen because it's too like gritty, so to speak. Once upon a time, that would have been fine. But people don't really want as gritty anymore. I feel like Joker was probably this close.
I was literally about to bring up. I was literally gonna bring up Joker because I was like, that has to be the exception of what you just said.
Yeah,
was like the Joker that was very much that gritty art house type of film. It was not a superhero film. It was not like your quintessential comic book film. It wasn't.
It wasn't. It was up there
wasn't
with
made
Logan.
to be like that.
Yeah. Logan and Joker had the same type of like tempo where this did not feel like a comic book movie. Logan a little more because, I mean, he had claws that popped out of his hand at the end of the day. But Joker did so well and so financially well because the IP is like 70 years old. I mean, people know the Joker. But had you taken off Joker and just said, this is a guy
Arthur
dressed like a clown,
right.
it would not have done that well. People would not have gone out in droves to see it. Why? Because they didn't love that character to form that, that bond with him. For another example, Pokemon is like probably one of the biggest IPs in the world. Detective Pikachu didn't make $2 billion. That didn't correlate. But it still made the big screen. Why? Because people thought this IP is huge. Let's throw it up here. I think we're getting to a point now where movies that are going to make big bucks are popular IPs. Marvel, DC. Fast and Furious created its own brand, so to speak, so it became a popular IP. But Disney, live action movies, things of that nature. The Avatars, when those come out.
I think that they have to be careful because there's a time where, especially now, where you cannot have an okay film and it do well at the box office. You can't.
Nope.
It just won't. It won't happen. And I say do well as in like meeting or exceeding industry expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw that with whether or not like the IP on comic books in general. You have that issue with like Harley Quinn. No one cared. I'm not saying no one cared, but you know what I mean. Like you compare that to the Joker, and no one cared about Harley Quinn as a character.
Yeah.
I think Margot Robbie did an excellent job, but the character, no one cared about it. So it becomes like this where you're thankful. I mean, that's a bad example because it obviously was in theaters, but then you become thankful that there's streaming and the ability for companies like Netflix and Hulu to pick up movies and pick up films and put them on their platforms so that people can view them and can enjoy them. And I think that one of the interesting things that I heard recently, it wasn't said recently, it was an older excerpt, but Jon Favreau was like, I don't know how, but I can watch, like, if I'm watching a movie at home, and like I pause the movie and there's like an hour and like 30 minutes left, I'm like, Jesus. There's an hour and 30 minutes left. Whether you like the movie or not, there's like an hour and 30 minutes left. I don't have an hour and 30 minutes. But going back to what we were saying about, the way streaming services just kind of like drop everything, at the end of every episode that you're like binge watching of like a TV series, you're like mad whenever you see that episode's about to end. Mm-hmm. Whether you're an hour in or not, you're like, oh my God, like, no, I don't want this end. And Issa Rae, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Issa Rae was like, it's because you want to be immersed in this world. You want to be immersed in this world. And that goes back to what you were saying about that camaraderie that people had and cosplay and just like the visceral emotions that everyone had, that you could feel the energy in the room. Just like that's their version of being at home and being like, wow, I feel this. I feel like I'm in this environment. I feel like I am a part of this. And now I can binge watch this entire, 10, 11 seasons of TV shows, and I really feel like I'm part of this. So I think it's just a huge shift all the way around. And in movie theaters, you're not really having the ability to feel that. But once every 10 years, Harry Potter and the Endgame,
Yeah.
like once every decade. Can movie theaters sustain that kind of bleeding 9 years in between? Clearly, AMC can't.
Well, AMC could have had a global pandemic not stop them. I mean, a global pandemic
Really?
had to hit.
Okay, yes, but AMC is the only theater that we know of right now that's on the verge of bankruptcy. They weren't swimming in cash before this. I mean, this is that teetering thing. There were problems. There were problems on the horizon. Like, we saw the iceberg. We just didn't turn in time.
Well, the thing with AMC, I'm glad you brought that up, actually. The thing with AMC is that I was reading, they bought a lot of mom and pop theaters and older theaters to re-renovate. Oh my gosh, why can't I talk? Into these AMC theaters. So they kind of broadened, their market. But then they also turned them into dine-ins. But then they also came up with AList. So today, it looks like, what a dumb move. But had the pandemic not hit, 3 years from now, AMC would have been laughing themselves silly, looking like Scrooge McDuck jumping into piles of money. Why?
Pools of money.
Because AMC, right before the pandemic hit, had just started seeing AList turn a profit. So that was just starting to turn a profit for them, where that would have kept carrying, because AList was only getting more popular. It wasn't like MoviePass, where it was dying, and we were all kind of like, that's a shady. AList makes sense how they do it, and it was building momentum. And for idiots like me, when you have AList, you think, well, I didn't pay for my movie ticket. I'm going to go to the dine-in because I might as well get a dinner out of this. I saved money on my ticket.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people like me who caved.
Not I.
Who caved and went to the dine-ins and spent a lot of money.
Right.
Who bought concessions with the rewards. Who on your birthday, you got your popcorn or whatever, and you were like, oh my gosh, I got to get more stuff now. You treat yourself, as Parks and Rec would like to say, because you save money on your ticket. So AMC was going to see, truckloads of money backing up for them. Whereas you think about like Regal and Cinemark, those theaters are nice, but they don't offer you anything like an AMC. They don't offer you that same experience as an AMC does. AMC, they make you, with this AList, feel like you're a part of the movie community. We're going to welcome you in and use it as your own like date night Netflix, because you pay a month. You can see all these movies in a month. It gives you an excuse to get out of the house and watch it on a giant screen. So, for me and my wife, we treat it as our Netflix. Movies I weren't going to go see, I have A-list. It doesn't matter. I can go see it anyway, so I'll go see it. And it's a night out, and it's an excuse to get out of the house, And I think unless companies like Cinemark and Regal do that moving forward, I think they're going to start falling by the wayside, because right now AMC might be stumbling, but they're not completely on the ground yet. And if they catch their footing and they start running again, it's not going to be a fair race at all. You're talking about Usain Bolt with some third graders.
Right. You guys, make sure you let us know what you think, whether or not you think AMC, if they're going to make it, if they're not going to make it. And also, do you prefer streaming at home, or do you prefer going to the theaters? So we'd love to hear your guys' opinions. Make sure you let us know on Facebook, in our comment section, and let us know on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube as well. So all the links will be available for you guys in the video. Thank you so much for tuning in this week to another episode.
And just like that, we're out of time on another Beg Pardon, ladies and gentlemen. As always, he's been Anthony. I've been Carl. So remember, let's all go to the movies. Let's all go to the movies. Until next time.